York City, my old stomping grounds. On Memorial Day, I actually just got in, a little bit jet lagged, but just arrived from Zurich, Switzerland, where I did my last video, the full moon in Scorpio video. I was in the Jungian Odyssey there, 7-day journey with the theme of rupture and repair, which I alluded to in my full moon in Scorpio video, but since I had to do that video so quietly because everybody was sleeping in my hotel at midnight and I was the Scorpio up at midnight trying to make a little video for you because I didn't want to miss the full moon in Scorpio, but I don't know if anyone could actually hear what I was talking about because I had to basically whisper through the whole video. So anyway, I did mention this theme of rupture and repair, but it has even more meaning to me now on the other side of that Scorpio full moon. And as we're really in the thick of this Saturn, Pluto, South Node convergence in Capricorn, I've been thinking so much about this ongoing archetypal influence of the devil. The devil is the Capricorn archetype in metaphysics, in tarot land and tarot speak. So I've been thinking a lot about that since we've got three major, planetary influences all hanging out there together. And it keeps getting hit. So we had the hit last week when we actually had the occultation of the moon going through that mess. And then now we've got, starting tomorrow, we're going to have the moon in Aries, I'm talking tropical, going through that same section of the zodiac. So we're going to all be feeling it again when that happens. And so basically this is an ongoing theme where if you have any planets around the 18 to 20 degree mark of cardinal signs, you're really feeling those activation points in your life, in your psyche. And what is the Capricorn archetype? Why is it called the devil archetype? And how, without demonizing, pun intended, that the sign of Capricorn, we don't want to demonize it by attributing the devil energy to it, but we want to understand it because it's a pretty deep essence with the devil, and it teaches us really the shadow side of the material world. So that's why often you'll find Capricorns on their journey become in many ways the most spiritual. So the devil is a necessary part of the spiritual journey. So we can't really avoid the darkness on our spiritual journey. And I think that's where a lot of people fall short as spiritual aspirants and people on the spiritual journey, trying to avoid their shadow, trying to just jump right up to those higher chakras without doing the deeper work. That you can feel when people aren't rooted. You can just even hear it in their voice, and then you can just see it in their eyes when there's a disconnect, when they haven't actually gone through their own darkness, through their own wilderness, faced their shadow, and come out the other side. You can't skip any steps there. Saturn requires fully going into it and going into it alone. So here we are now, right in the, it's like we're basically not, there's nowhere to run or hide all summer because these energies are not letting us go. It's like requiring us to continuously do the work. And I've noticed a few themes. One in particular I've noticed is like a world weariness, which you often get with the South Node or K2, because it's an energy that takes us out of the world. It doesn't want to be hung up in, especially patterns from the past, and attachments of the world. It wants to relinquish those attachments. And if we think of the devil archetype as those chains that couple is wearing around their neck, if you know the image of the card, it depicts this couple under the influence of this big beast, like this very kind of gnarly looking scary devil creature. I always think of the devil emojis now, and he looks kind of ridiculous. So it's a reminder that we can't take ourselves too seriously, but at the same time, the couple is each of them are wearing these giant chains around their neck. But the chains are worn freely and they're loose. Like they actually, when you see the picture, the people could take the chains right off if they so chose to. So either they're unconscious and they don't realize that they could just literally pull them off, or they're just bound there because it's a choice, which often with whatever it is that enslaves us, we might want to blame something outside of us, some kind of devil, you know, outside of us, some curse, but it's us. I mean, we have the choice. We can choose differently if we're awake and conscious, of course. So that's the question. Are they conscious of those chains or not? Are you conscious of whatever enslaves you or not? Whatever you're in bondage to, are you aware of it? Or are you just living it out? So that's whatever addiction, whatever toxic relationship, whatever work addiction you have. Some addictions are more obvious than others. Some are more subtle. So, you know, we can say, oh yeah, that person's a heroin addict, or that person's a, you know, cocaine addict or an alcoholic. Those are more obvious addictions, but what about relationship addictions? What about, there's love addiction, there's sex addiction, there's work addiction, there's even spiritual addiction, which sounds crazy, but there's people who are addicted to gurus. They go like one guru to the next, or one yoga conference, retreat, festival to the next, you know. There's people who are you know, shopping addicted, food addicted. There's so many addictions. So the addiction is when you've given your power over to that thing and it becomes compulsive, and you no longer have, you might think you have free will, but that thing actually has you. So this is what I think is really coming up for us now, is where something has power over us, where we feel enslaved. And that's our spiritual work. That the level that we're enslaved is where we're disconnected from our spirit, or we're looking for spirit in something external. It can be a person, it can be a substance, it can be an object, it can be a piece of chocolate cake. You know, we all have variations of all of these things, you know. It could be coffee. I know that's certainly a big one for me. So whatever, and there's the, let me just turn that off. Thought I did. So whatever has that power over us, right? Whatever has us enslaved or in bondage. This is what the Capricorn theme is trying, the Saturn theme is trying to help us to become conscious of, so that we can make different choices. And it's interesting that we're here in the Gemini season, which is the season of choice, coming up on the new moon in Gemini on the 3rd. So we have this in the background of how we're choosing. The Sun and Mercury are now transiting through Gemini, the sign of Gemini, which is the sign of choice. In the tarot, it's the Lovers, but in some decks, it's also called the sign, the choice, because it's about the duality, it's about the masculine and the feminine, and it's about how we choose. And ultimately, it's trying to teach us to choose the both and option. In other words, not splitting off in the dual realm of this or that. It's like finding the reconciliation of the opposites, which now this can circle back to the Jungian theme of rupture and repair, and what that has to do with this current transit that I'm talking about, and how we're all feeling this in our unconscious right now, the collective unconscious. We're all feeling like the world is a bit ruptured, right, and messy, and that's been disconcerting for a lot of people, and we're looking for answers to us. I think that's one of the reasons astrology's extra popular right now, is because we're really, a lot of people, more than ever since I've been alive, I would say, are feeling lost. There's an interesting mix of being in the dark and in the unknown, and yet having more access to wisdom than ever. It's a strange paradox. And also there's a huge awakening happening, so it's not just like people are all in the dark and unconscious. There's a huge awakening happening simultaneously, and actually within one individual, both are happening. You could see, you probably feel it in yourself. There's one aspect of you, one part of you that's really trudging in the dark, and there's another part that's like on fire, or really like, wow, there's a deep awakening happening here. Like, I'm seeing things I've never seen before, and I'm really growing into my true potential. Yet I have no idea where the hell I'm going or what's coming next. Yet that, I think, is part of the power of just coming into the now. And I think we're having to learn that, maybe the hard way, maybe not so hard, depending on how we do, with that moment to moment awareness and trust in a deeper process that's unfolding right now. So that's another thing. I mean, Saturn being the lord of time and the limitations of time in the temporal world is also showing us that we can grow within those limits. That's actually how we grow. We need those boundaries. We need those limits. We need that container to help us grow and mature. And yet, we also have to realize that the material world, the world of time, is limited, and we can't lose our relationship to the infinite or the ephemeral. So we've got the temporal and we've got the ephemeral, and we have to keep one foot in each, right? Like they say, we have two eyes. We have a spiritual eye and we have a material. One for the spiritual, the limitless, the infinite, and one for the limited material. Like, we need both because we are here on the earth. And one of the things Jung said is that we have to be fully incarnated in our experience in order to go into the more subtle realms. We can't skip steps. We can't just race right up to those higher chakras without really doing the deep grounded work of feeling rooted from the first chakra, from the root chakra, the Muladhara, into our lives. If we don't have that connection, we're not going to grow. I mean, we're gonna go crazy. We're gonna get off balance. We're gonna get inflated, but we're not gonna be able to rise. The Kundalini is not going to be able to rise safely. So it's imperative for all of us right now to get really rooted in the present moment and in the body, to be really embodied. That's the key. You might have noticed you're more sensitive than ever, and your body requires more sensitivity and more awareness. And the body is your sacred garment. It's your container for doing this deeper spiritual work. So it starts there. It starts with what we put in the body, how we treat the body, and even the thoughts and the feelings and the emotions in the nervous system, in the subtle body, which also requires us to do a lot of healing of our trauma. That also goes into the rupture and repair. We talked a lot about trauma and the relationship of trauma with rupture and repair, and how some traumas are never resolved. I mean, most are not. The nature of healing and transcendence is that there's not really a resolution. It's not about resolution. That's a myth, or that's kind of a naive concept that we actually can resolve. There's a reparation, there's a healing, there's a constant pulling apart, coming back together in a way that is more integrated. But the idea that there's some kind of arrival, actually one of my favorite Jungian analysts, Bernard Sartorius, and I did an interview with him, which I'm going to get transcribed. I wanted to post it as a podcast, but we had too much background noise interference, plus it just wasn't going to translate well into audio, but I'm going to try to transcribe it into a written interview, because there's so much wisdom in that. Anyway, one of the things he says that I really loved is that it's actually a regressive idea for us to think that we're going to arrive somewhere, like at some conclusion or destination. Like, if it's forced, it's regressive, because part of our evolution is to realize that there is really no final arrival, right? We're constantly unraveling and becoming is what it is. It's not like we just land and that's it. There's not a happily ever after. There's not like, okay, you get to that destination point. What do they say? The destination is the journey, or the journey is the destination, something like that. So it's a constant relationship of rupturing, repairing, rupturing, repairing. And I think the more infantile part of our psyche has this idea that we're just going to arrive and just keep in this kind of homeostasis. And of course, we're all looking for balance and peace, but that comes from within, while all of this, the nature of the universe is change going on around us. So that's a little bit of a more of a Pisces theme, which I want to get into in a future video, the Neptune in Pisces, which is an ongoing theme. We're going to have Neptune stationing retrograde next month, which, so I'll make a deeper video about that, but or I'll cover that in more in a more extensive conversation. But right now I wanted to really focus on this this confluence happening between Saturn, Pluto, and the South Node, because as I mentioned, it's going to keep working on us every time the moon goes through that fray. So it's going to happen now, if you're watching this video, when the moon goes into Aries, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So we just had it last week, and then we're going to have it again when the moon goes into Libra next, and then of course sorry, Cancer next, and then Libra, and then back again to Capricorn. So it's going to just keep happening as we're still in that energy. So it's an ongoing lesson for us. And the questions to ask is, where do you feel world weary? What has control or bondage, has you in bondage, has power over you? How do you reclaim that? And how do you find that integration of the temporal and the ephemeral? How do you keep that dance going? I mean, that's a question you have to live, obviously. It's not one you can just answer with your intellect. But this is what these are just some of the themes I feel that this planetary mixture, I keep saying convergence, but this influence, it's an intensification of like one archetypal influence of the devil on our psyches. So looking at what that means for you personally, maybe journaling about it. What are your inner demons? Guilt, fear, shame. What still has control over you? Shame's a big one to work with right now too, and maybe I'll make a whole video about that, because my battery's about to die as I'm making this video. I don't want to lose all the material. But anyway, I guess the gods are telling me my time's up. So I'll be back with more, but that's enough to, I think, try to digest for now. And thanks so much for watching.